So, welcome everyone. This is DOCTALKs. It's a ministry of the Christian Church in Virginia, but for the whole church. So each week we talk about a different topic that's important or critical to the life of the church. And today's topic is around what to do with our buildings. This seems to be a very popular topic and throughout the life of the church. I've asked Jim Michael from Disciples Church Extension to come join us today to have a conversation, not a presentation as such. It's really meant to be a conversation about each topic. And so Jim's going to talk for a little bit and then allows questions, conversations, just for us to wrestle with this really important topic. I want to kind of set up this conversation as a regional minister who, we see this all the time. And so I just want to lift up, there are different ways that we can come at or get to the point if we need to talk about our building. And I've got just a couple, and then I'm going to turn it over to Jim, and then we're going to just do some conversation back and forth with each other about what to do with our buildings. And, I come to this in several from different stories of working with churches. One of them, I'm an optimist, and I always want to try to help a church fix all their issues and all that. And I was working with a church that, of course, it's a big building. They have about 22 people left in a sanctuary that sat about 400. And I just asked them, when do they remember their most exciting time and having purpose? And what they shared was a story of how when they began, they met in a garage. And that's when they felt most alive. But being alive at that point in time led their visionary people at that time to build this building that sat 400. But now they come to a time when they have 22. And so I met with them, but they had waited too long at that point in time. They kind of passed over that piece. And so that church ended up having almost quickly to sell their building. But they were just tired. They just had run out of energy. I wish I had been able to have this conversation with them 2, 3, maybe 5 years before that. I also had a situation where there was a town that had been flooded, and one church had been flooded so much they needed to move into and share a building with a church that was nearby. Couldn't have been more than 4 blocks. Can you imagine 2 disciple churches 4 blocks apart, but actually not like meeting with each other? But we do that. But these are 2 both really big building churches, but because of the flood, they ended up meeting together. And what happened there is that they had to address a lot of maybe the reasons why we don't want to address building issues or the fears. For a whole year, they met together, 2 services, shared the same pastor, took up 2 separate offerings plates, one red, one blue. Make sure all those issues that go into actually what do we do when we need to talk about buildings. And then another story is that there were 3 churches, 1 Disciples, 1 ELCA, and 1 UCC, all big building churches that had grown over the years, had those founding stories, had been huge churches with major ministries with 400 or 500 people in each of the churches. But when I met them, they were just big. They were big building churches with a lot less people. And they were spending most of their budget money on maintaining the building and not necessarily being able to do ministry. Over a period of about 3 to 4 years, they began the intense talk about what they might do together. What that resulted in was a place in Minnesota called Spring House Ministries, where those 3 churches, instead of merging, they ended up choosing one of the buildings and working together to fix that building up and creating 3 separate sanctuaries. And so the churches are not merged, but they rotate around throughout the year so that no one person or one church is able to sort of own a sanctuary, but they share Sunday school, they share mission opportunities with one another, as well as the fact that now they spend less than a third of what they used to on a building. and yet they are vital again. Um, so I just share a few of these stories with you. I'll share one more, just to kind of warm up. There are different ways that we can come at this conversation about what to do with our building. In my in my own hometown, there were two churches, one on one side of the river and one on the other. The large church actually birthed the church what I grew up in. And when I became regional minister, the church that had birthed my church, my home church, was now a large church there was about 17 people left. All 17 people, I'm sure this doesn't happen in any other church, but all 17 people were still sitting in their same pew that they did when they grew up. So they were not within they were like all like 8 pews away from each other in that sanctuary, but that was their church. The reason why I share that one is that when I began to meet with them about what to do with their building, they through a long conversation with me, one had to figure out what to do with the things in the building. They decided to sell the building, but they also had some endowment. And that church, in wrestling with their legacy of what they wanted to do, because they were sure that they couldn't continue to maintain spending all their money on building, and they wanted to do something before they just ran out of money for themselves. And they ended up creating an endowment that is now used for churches who get to that critical moment when they need to decide what to do with their building or what to do with their church. That sometimes that church felt that they got to the point that they couldn't call a pastor with enough quality, what they needed, in order to turn them around. So that scholarship is now used to give to some congregations that endowment to help them be able to maybe call a person who might help them out of that cycle. So there are different ways to come at this question. What do we do with our buildings? I have had so much fun working with Jim Michael over the years. I moved to Virginia, became the regional minister here in Virginia, not in his territory. And then darn it if he didn't follow me, just for at least a moment or two. But Jim's had lots of experience too with this. And I think that's the key, is that sometimes when we as church come into these moments, it's the first time we've experienced this. And so it's great to be able to hear from people who deal with this all the time, both regional ministers, but also from Jim Michael from our Disciples Church Extension Ministry. So I just wanted to introduce himself and talk for a little bit, and then give all of you the opportunity to ask questions about, maybe where you're coming from and what might be some things that you want to talk about today. So Jim, tell us a little bit and say what you want.
Well, thank you, Bill. And it's true. I enjoyed working with you so much in the upper Midwest that I followed you to Virginia. So a little bit about myself. I, for 35 years, almost 36 years, was in the civil engineering profession. And so I was working with a lot of buildings, a lot of construction. And so I understood buildings very well. I married my wife, who is a pastor within the Disciples denomination, and she helped me relearn about buildings. so I actually found that there was more purposes than what I had originally thought, and actually made me stop and rethink the way that I look at it. So it's been a good thing. I understand, the one of the things that brought me to Church Extension was because of a disaster that happened to our building there in Joplin, Missouri, and the reconstruction of it. So I not only do I do the building and capital services side of things at Church Extension, I'm also the disaster response. But one of the things that we have found, it's been interesting to me. I've been at Church Extension for 9 years. Prior to the pandemic, I worked with maybe, I'll push it and say half a dozen congregations during that period um, about relocation and talking to them about their building. But since the pandemic, I have talked to dozens of congregations, and we've had lots of really good conversations. A lot of conversations, like Bill had said, that we wish that we had had the opportunity to talk to the congregations a couple years earlier. But it's been fantastic conversations that we've had in how do we take and look at our building now post pandemic uh, in different ways than what we did before the pandemic. Um, one of the things that has came to me is that we're seeing the decline in in-person worship, um, and so that has been led to, okay, do we need this much building? But more importantly, is we're looking at our ministries differently. When we were doing hybrid worship, we were doing different things with our ministries as well, changing the way that we did stuff so that we could continue working with the community and do the ministries outside of that, which then led to different ways we use the building. So it's been a very interesting time for me and for the other advisors within the organization. And so we're talking with congregations, and we're trying to figure out, okay, what do they need? What do they need from us? And everything that we're seeing, leads back to the ministries. Are we still trying to do the same ministries that we did 50 years ago? Or are we now willing to take and look at things differently and change the way we do ministries? And more importantly, how does the building fit into that? Um, I'm actually working with a congregation that had a disaster and they lost their building. Uh, I went and started working with them a couple weeks after the disaster. And the first thing that we were going to talk about that morning was about their ministries. And the question I asked them is, what ministries were you doing within the community before this happened? And they really couldn't tell me, because what we had to do is, before we could decide what kind of building we needed to rebuild with, we needed to know what was going to go into it. Here's an opportunity. They had a blank slate. And so we had a lot of conversation. We spent the entire day talking about the ministries. But what we're doing today, and it's very exciting, and I have really loved being a part of this, is looking at different things that we're doing with the buildings, repurposing areas of the building, partnering with different different types of groups and entities that we hadn't thought of in the past. They're needing space. We have lots of space. So what can we do? One congregation, actually, the minister had came to a seminar that I was giving and asked me the question during a break as to whether they should tear down their education wing. And my answer was, well, I really need to look at it. I can't answer that question without having seen it. And after looking at the building, it was in fantastic shape. So my response was, well, we need to find people that need space. And we ended up doing an adult day center that was needing space on that side of town. And so it was a win-win situation. We found somebody that needed the space. We had somebody that had excess space. So that's something that we're looking at is, what can we do? What entities are within the community that we need to take and start talking to and see if we can partner with? So there's just so many things, that we're doing. Relocation. Uh, I've got a number of congregations I'm working with right now where we're doing what I call a right sizing. I won't call it downsizing because it's not. We're right sizing for the congregation, um, getting out of buildings where we have historically had problems with the accessibility, utility costs. So we're looking at that, but it's hard. It's hard to let go of what we've had for as long as we can remember. Was working with the church just 2 weeks ago and participating in a closing ceremony where we're moving out of a building that they have occupied for over 120 years. And they're moving into a building that is a fourth of the size and has no problems with accessibility. Getting them to come to the understanding that the church is not the building, that the church is the individuals within. And once they came to that realization, they were very excited about what the future, because now they can do things that they've never been able to do in the past. So what I'm doing is just trying to help congregations to look at possibilities. And that possibility may be within the building that they currently occupy. It may be someplace else. Unfortunately, there's even congregations that I work with that I help with their closing. What do we do, with a building, when it's no longer viable for that congregation? So these are all things that, that I've had the opportunity to work with. And I love working with congregations that are open to new ideas, to new things, that don't say, well, that's the way we've always done it. The pandemic helped us with that. We were out of our buildings and we could no longer say that, well, that's the way we've always done it, because we had to come up with new ways. So this is an exciting time for the church and for the congregations. So that's just in a nutshell. That's a little bit of what I do. I'm sure that you've got lots of questions as to what possibilities are out there. So I'll open it up to
Yeah.
Bill and to all of you.
Yeah, excellent. Again, because I'm sure you're all coming at this from different angles. We want this to be a conversation. There are lots of people in this room I know have expertise and experience, but so anyone want to share why'd you come to this meeting, or do you have a question you want to tell us about your situation? Because when you're doing it for the first time, sometimes maybe you'll have some questions about how to go about that. So anybody want to go first?
Well, can I jump in for a second, Bill?
Go ahead,
This
Bill.
is Bill Noby, and I just wanted to add something to what Jim said. Here in the Northern Lights, and there are at least 2 Northern Lights congregations represented, which I'm really glad to see. There are 3 congregations that are currently in talks with, or actually underway, in repurposing their property into low-income senior housing with Christian church homes, which excites the folks in the congregations because they're helping the community, and it also gives them the opportunity to right size, as Jim was saying. So just throw that in the hopper as another possibility, depending on what your situation happens to be.
Excellent.
So,
Kathy?
Bill, are they repurposing the buildings they have for senior housing potentially and moving their own ministry, or somehow coexisting on the space?
Yes, both.
Thank you for being so clear. Yeah, because we do have a congregation that was a disciple Methodist congregation together. In fact, they're installing a new pastor in a few weeks, but they tore down their fellowship hall and put up low income housing or moderate income housing for 24 units, which will open in a couple of months. And so because in Portland, housing is very short in a lower income space. And so they said, we really don't need a fellowship hall because there's only 40 of us. We could do our event. They took out the pews, made the sanctuary multi-purpose, and figured that was big enough space for them. So, and that's been just pretty wildly successful. So other people are watching that and saying, how much space do we as a congregation need? We also had another congregation sell their building and move into a smaller church building that was empty in town and rehab that small church building. And we just this week had a congregation sell their building for, wait for it, $3.5 million to the Salvation Army, who wanted it. And so that has given them money to go build a more appropriate building. And the Salvation Army is allowing them to stay for a year rent-free while they prepare their relocated space. So when there are options out there, and as early as the 1970s and 80s, the first church I served, we combined 3 congregations also, and put in 7 social service agencies. And then the congregation in a small size was there for another 30 years, but the building was full. So it's not a new conversation, but I think more people are having it at once. And I think that is somewhat overwhelming to people like me, regional ministers, and others on this that are regional ministers, when there's so many congregations who are wanting to have this conversation at the same time, yet in different circumstances from each other. And how do we support those conversations? And what are the resources for where to have them, how to have them, and who are the partners and who are the storytellers?
Excellent. Anyone else want to
Kathy, I really appreciate what you had to say there. Knowing where the resources are or who to talk to is so important. And it's amazing to me that we are not able to get it out there to all the congregations as to what all is available to them, so they don't have to recreate the wheel. But there are so many ideas. I love your idea of, having something out there where a resource where we can take and we can talk to others that have gone through this or are going to be going through it at the same time. But there are so many different things. Heart of the Rockies is going to be, you're going to see a lot more information coming out about them, where they had 14 acres of ground that was bought by the region. It was a new church start, several years ago, and they have grown to the point the building that they've got there is really too small, but they're not worried about themselves. What they are doing is they're partnering with 3 outside agencies, and they are building 71 units of affordable housing. They're working with Habitat. They're working with CARES Housing. They're working with LaRoche, or Larch, which is for those with handicaps. And so they're looking at how can we help the community, and that's what their focus is. So, but again, they had all this acreage that they didn't need, so they're making good use of it. And Bill, I appreciate you talking about the Christian church homes. That is an organization that I do a lot of stuff with. And if you have excess property, we can definitely look at taking and partnering with them and with the congregations into putting in affordable housing, for the older generation. So that's another thing that we have been doing a lot of. A lot of it's especially in California.
I see some others look like they want to. Yep, go ahead. Ask your question.
Okay. Well, I kind of just wanted to describe our situation. We're in Helena. I'm Barb Lancaster. I see my name says B, but we're in Helena. We've been talking with Pastor Bill Roby and lots of folks. COVID was a big turning point for us where we really recognized we haven't been doing what we really want to do for many years, but COVID really highlighted that. But during COVID, we partnered with Family Promise here in Helena because our church has one of those giant education wings. Well, I don't know if it's as big as some, but big for our congregation. And so they were able to use that all through, the pandemic just to house their folks and continue to have the program work in Helena. So anyway, we got really comfortable with them. But when we realized we really need to do something about our building, the costs are, it's not the ministry we want is not taking care of a building. So we visited with Habitat for Humanity. We have a meeting coming up with a realtor property manager here in Helena. He actually manages the property that owns the parking lot we use. So that's one of the problems with our building. We have no parking lot or parking really for things during the week or for people renting space. So we have several groups that use our building and getting more. And that's really feels good, but still, we still have this problem of the expense of the building because some pay and some can't. And so with Family Promise, they are bringing us a proposal for partnering to use maybe the whole education wing. I'm not sure, but their thing is they would like to create a community center because we're right in the middle of the city. And so they want it to be like I think they're calling it Center for Hope or something. So we're really looking at all the options. We have about 21 people that are really involved. 12 of those are in leadership and really want to do more studies together and things like that. But we're kind of our energy goes to the building and just the frustration of it right now, it seems. So then we have about 8 to 10 people that come just on Sunday. And we know that if we sold our building, we would not have them. I mean, they are there for our building, which is a really historic. I mean, it's the oldest church in Helena that has the same congregation. I mean, because Disciples built it in 1884 and we're still there. So it's very historic. And anyway, it's feeling for me that we can do a partnership with Family Promise and really have our building serve in an amazing way. And they wanted to see it continue to serve the people who were there also and let us be there on Sundays. So it feels right now like a really good combination. The problem is if we own it, we have some old windows, old stained glass that need repairs. And I've been on that committee and found a lot of the history of our church. But the big thing is $80,000 to $100,000 to repair the windows. And so our committee has searched for grants. If we are in the church, we can't seem to get a historical grant. I mean, they may be out there, but it's hard to find historical grants that will be given to a congregation that's living. If there's a congregation in the building, they're like, oh, no, we can't do that. Too political or something, I don't know. And then also for Family Promise, if they're in our building wanting to say build their day center, they can't get a grant unless they own it. So those are the two things that we're looking at right now that feel really promising, yet there's obstacles.
That's really good because you brought up some issues that I think particularly here today, but also others who might watch this is some issues. Are there Jim or others, are there resources or agreements or things that you could help a local church with these questions?
There actually is a national organization that is it is called Sacred Places.
Yeah,
And
we checked them out, and then that comes back to our energy because in order to apply for a Sacred Places grant, you have to have and this has been a year since I was looking at them. I think 3 people that are willing to commit to training, and then because they want to make grants that are like $250,000. They want you to look at your whole building, which is wonderful. You know, if we were going to be um, staying there for the long term, we might be able to get a couple people that would commit to that. But right now, that was a little daunting for us.
totally understand with that, Barb. I have had the opportunity to work with multiple congregations within our denomination that have applied for the grant. One of the things that they ask for is for an architectural assessment
Yeah.
of the facility. But actually, we do a building evaluation that the Sacred Places individuals, that their organization accepts, and it's at much less than what the architect does. So we actually do those as well.
Great.
Can I follow up with what I have seen in some places is when we start sharing or thinking about partnering, whether or not we sell the building to the other entity or all of that kind of thing, are there do's and don'ts or I mean,
Good
I get
question.
this question all the time. Do you have a contract to make sure we don't do something stupid? That's their theological term. But are
Yeah.
there resources so they don't have to invent it? I mean, no, to help with that.
Bill, to answer your question, is that is something that we've heard, over and over, and we have developed some examples of building use agreements. So we're happy to share those. Now, one of the things that we do say is that we, highly suggest that an attorney in that area review and then make any modifications that may need to be made.
Excellent.
And those are free.
Yay, free. Yay, we like that.
Hey, thank you. I like that.
If you have church board insurance, our insurance board, they have documents for building use.
Yeah.
That's where we got ours. And they have templates, and then you can adjust it to your own need and congregation. So they also have resources because I was just listening to the conversation. Location is an important part of this whole conversation. I'm in Virginia Beach, and if a nonprofit needs to rent space in Virginia Beach, they can't afford it. Mm-hmm. So the church is a perfect place for that to happen. If they give me 20% of what they would pay for the convention center, I'm making it's as if I had 5 families join the church on Sunday morning. So, that's how that's what we're doing with our multipurpose space. At the rate things are going in 2023, we will probably underwrite 50% of our budget by the end of the year from the back door. I only have 22 people come to church, but I have about 800 people come through that building every week. And one of the things that I learned, and I'm a cradle disciple, growing up in the church, we had no problem with Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts using church and brownies and Cub Scouts and all that. And, and I have no problem with that. But I was a Boy Scout and a Cub Scout, and I know what messes we made. But yet when we have adult nonprofit companies want to come in and use it, it's like, oh, we can't have you come into our church. And it's like, what is wrong with this picture, folks? But I tell you, Again, I'm not saying it can happen every location, but we are, the first person I had come to our space was the mental health department for the city of Virginia Beach, because across the board in Virginia, I can't talk about every place else, the mental health is where cuts all happened pre-COVID. And so where they had education classes, where they had seminars, they had no space anymore. And this was prior to Zoom, the Zoom world, right? So I was booked in 2018, 2019. We had health fairs. And what happens, I'm bringing 1,000 people in the back door. And if I get 1% to come and check us out on Sunday morning, man, how easy is evangelism when you're bringing them there and all the church has to do is greet them? Because what our policy is, we're not in the real estate business, we're in the people and hospitality business. So no one comes into that building in the back room, I don't care if they give us $1 or $1,000, without two members of the church greeting them and walking them to the back. So I use it as an evangelism tool and to help take care of the building. And the thing that amazes, one of the things that I've learned is people who tell you they don't have money to help pay for the, and we don't do contracts. We're not in the real estate business. I say, we would like a love gift. Here's you're getting this much square footage for whatever you can afford to pay us. And if they were renting the Holiday Inn for 2-hour event, it cost them $1,000. They have no problem giving us $400 or $300. And again, $300 to the church is a lot of money. It's not a lot to real estate people, right? So that's the model that we've used. And it's been, I mean, COVID, everything stopped, of course. But we're just getting back into the routine. And the number of, I got people coming from Portsmouth and Suffolk to use our building, which is way out of their area, but it's affordable. And they're doing, I mean, when you really look at the other nonprofits out in our communities, and it takes a little bit of work and word of mouth. I have people just call me up and say, Pastor Greg, we need space. We're doing a teenage fashion show for girls who can't afford dresses to go to the prom. Can we use your building? And absolutely. So, I mean, I go to the board and, all the stuff you got to do for church, but I'm the contact person. So, I'm very, I would talk to anybody about what we do, and very passionate about the ministry that we do at Child's Christian Church. But again, I'm in Virginia Beach. That isn't going to happen in rural Kentucky, I don't think, so you just bear that in mind with the particular model that we use. But it is amazing how the positive outcomes, and again, it's not about the budget, it's not about that, but when you have people who feel they have a little bit of ownership in it, they take care of that building. I mean, and they'll like when we had an incident that happened and they said, don't worry about it. You have taken care of us for a year. We're going to pay for that. We want to put an extended gravel parking lot in the back. And I got two nonprofits who said, Pastor Greg, when you get that done, just tell us what the bill is. We're going to pay for it. We don't even need to budget for it, because they appreciate the hospitality and the space that they're allotted and able to use. So that's just what I was going to share with Bill.
That's excellent.
Bill, there's lots of Bills here today. So
yeah, right. And I know George from Southern Street, I know you're all in the middle of wrestling with what to do moving along that process too. You want to share a little bit about where you all on your journey?
Sure. Winter before last, our boiler died completely, and the building was built 70 years ago, has had very little upkeep in 70 years. So not only the boiler completely dying, but everything else is in the process of dying. The electric, the water pipes, everything. So the church, after a lot of discernment and a lot of grieving, the church members are ready to take a step in a new direction. And what has been done recently that we're feeling hopeful about is we began conversations with Virginia Housing Authority here in the state of Virginia. They came out and talked about different models to go in. And the one that has excited everyone is to partner with a developer in a certain way. And that is make a deal with a developer. The church would still own the property, but the developer would have some guaranteed right to the property, like 99 years. They would tear down totally the building, build a new building that would include for us the ground floor as a worship space and any other particulars like fellowship hall, offices, classrooms. The additional stories, which might be like 4 more stories, would be apartments and condominiums, but also built into the deal would be for us to specify and agree with the developer a certain number of units that would be for affordable housing or senior citizens, or even was mentioned large earlier about people with disabilities, so that it can be kind of a win-win of financially a way to survive, but also able to do something positive for social justice, you know, for affordable housing. Here in Richmond, we are in Richmond, and we're in a good location as far as hopefully a developer being interested. The housing prices are, you know, skyrocketing, and lower income, even middle income people have a hard time finding a place to live. And so we are hoping to do this. Tomorrow, we have another conversation beginning with Better Housing Coalition, perhaps. They specialize in options for affordable housing for people. So we're hoping to get them to help us, and then also Virginia Housing to help us find a developer to work with. So I guess that's kind of it. We've spent about a year on discernment and conversations and listening meetings, and hoping to give every church member a chance to talk, you know, all their ideas and hopes and dreams. But it's time to move forward. I mentioned our boiler died a year and a half ago, and so we don't have any heat in the building. And so I'm in the building right now. I'm in my office, and it's pretty cold. So, you know, it's just not sustainable to hold on to an old building that's just falling apart around you. And then I love the term right sizing, because that's what we need to do as well. The building 70 years ago was built for a congregation of 300 or 400 people. And now we have a very active group of about 50 or 60 people. And we don't need the big sanctuary, the many classrooms, and all those things, even if they were in working order, which they are not. But so we're cautiously optimistic about some of the things we're working on, but partnering with folks who know how to do it and can do it, but also taking in our wishes for affordable housing, and we're hoping will be a good partnership.
Excellent. That's why I love these, because we, coming into this conversation or other things, there's just different ways to get here and different journeys. And so if I could tell churches anything, it's like, you're not alone, and there are lots of options. Please see yourself as visionaries for, this is our purpose now. This is where we should go, but there are options. Bill, I see your hand up. Go ahead and talk.
Right. I wanted to acknowledge that we have two folks from First Christian Church in Olympia, Washington, on the call, and Robert and Dorothy Smith and Judy Gregorius. And I know they're kind of at a crisis point right now. And I just want to do a little networking with them and Jim Michael to say to them, I don't know what transpired with your meeting. I know that there's some talk about getting some outside help to figure out what to do with your building. And I'm just wondering if you may want to, not now, but at some point, have a conversation with Jim about him and DCEF helping you, or you may have already done that. I don't know, but I didn't want to let that opportunity pass by.
Bill, we had a meeting Sunday, a big open discussion, and talked about finances, did a little dreaming about right sizing, I guess. And we are really at the very beginning of what somebody said they'd spent a year discerning what to do. But affordable housing did come up, tearing down our fellowship hall did come up. But the first thing we need to do is figure out how to catch up on overdue bills that we have. And Sunday's meeting, I think Judy agrees with us that it was a very good meeting, but it's probably just the first of several. And contacting the regional or the national church, finding out about programs that are available, that was talked about too. So this sounds a little bit like a cop-out, but none of us three are actually in the church leadership right now. But the leaders, our board chair and so on, are aware that, about contacting the national church. And I think it'll hopefully over the next few months or a year, things will really start happening. Because we're at the point right now where we need to do something or we're going to die out. People talking about active congregations of 20 or 50. We had 8 in service about 3 weeks ago, and we had 9 the week after that. And we're meeting in our fellowship hall right now because, frankly, it costs less to heat than the sanctuary. We did have, our meeting Sunday involved, I think, just over 20 people, which was definitely encouraging after the.
I don't think there were that many people, Dorothy.
No, I counted them. There were.
Oh, did you? Oh,
I did count them. There were 3 or 4 on Zoom, and.
Sorry, I didn't count.
Yeah, I think there was 19 or 20.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, yeah, we are definitely aware that we can reach out to the national church.
Good. Well, I want to thank Bill, the other Bill, the leader Bill, for making this kind of forum possible so that you can get connected with folks like Jim Michael who can, when you say the national church,
well, yeah,
DCEF or you're talking CCF. So Jim's a good contact person for you.
Yeah, I've written his name down actually.
I've taken notes too.
Yeah.
And Jim may be your representative, or he will point you the right direction. He's good.
Okay.
So,
May I? I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Jude.
Just follow her up a little bit. Getting rid of a building, it's been really helpful hearing other people talk about the buildings, because this has been my feeling. Not too long ago, I was property chair, so I know how much that building costs to operate and to repair, and it's only going to be more as time goes on. And I'd like to, my theory is that we really need to get rid of the building and get a smaller location. That's my opinion. I'm sort of out of the circle. I don't know what I want to say, but anyway, it's really been helpful to hear other people's, saying some of the same things. It's the building is not us. And I think, I don't know, Dorothy and Robert, don't you think we've gone past the building is us?
I think we're getting there.
Okay.
I think we're getting there. I
Okay.
think people are more willing to accept that the building might go than we were even 5 years ago. The building it's about 90 years old and was built for a congregation of 400. And you heard me say how many we're getting in church now.
But it's in a great location, downtown Olympia, right next to all of the major state office buildings and whatnot. So the property is valuable.
Yeah, yeah, we know that.
Well, one of the things with the location and us is a lot of our ministry is hooked up to the building. I mean, we host, prior to COVID anyway, host a ton of different organizations. And there's even one called the Ecumenical Catholic Communion that meets on Sunday mornings in part of our building.
So,
Well, and we have little tiny houses in our close by parking lot that are there too.
Yep, all of these stories go together. Kathy, I see you have a question. I'm gonna let you go ahead and jump in.
Well, one of the things that just came up is also important, which is one of the things that holds some of the congregations and the regional church I serve back is exactly what you just said. What about the people we house? I have a congregation that really needs to finish being in a building, but there's a daycare center for 21 kids. And they get stuck on what will happen to these 21 kids. And so it took me saying, if I could find a place for the daycare center, could you sell the building? Because it was their mission to provide that space for low income childcare. And they're right, that would be lost. And so it's not just the congregations, but the other story I have is of a congregation with a big downtown building that found that there were actually multiple small church buildings that are empty in metro areas because of small congregations that have finished. And so when people say, well, where would we go? With the property value of some of the buildings that are owned by our small, big building churches, those buildings can sell for enough money to buy outright a small church building and rehab it and have money left over. And we've seen that twice in the last 10 years. And it makes a big difference when you're in a building where all of a sudden you're cozy instead of huge. And those congregations have started adding members because they're not in a cavernous space. They're now in a space where they filled about half of that small church space and they were able to rehab it and make it into a really delightful space. And now they can't figure out why they didn't do it sooner. But I think one of the things of, we don't want to build a building, that's too much work, we don't want to rent space. Sometimes there's an empty church building in your community. And even in small towns, there are small church buildings that are empty. So that's another way to go.
Excellent. Jim, we're going to give you the last word.
Well, thank you, Bill. And thank all of you for taking part in this. One of the things that I wanted to take and add to what Kathy was saying is that, with the relocation, the number of congregations that I've worked with relocation, one of the things that we have done is we've put together it's a worksheet that helps the congregations to figure out how much space they need, what type of space they need. So that's something, reach out to me. I'm happy to share. One other thing that, Kathy, that you were talking about was talking about, having an existing ministry taking place within a space. One of the things that, as the owner of the property, when you go to sell, you can put whatever type of restrictions that you want onto that for the sale of that property. So if you wanted it to say that, that the new owner could not take and tear the building down, repurpose it for a period of 12 months, 24 months, whatever that happens to be, so that the daycare has an opportunity to find a new space, you can add that in. If the buyer, the developer, is wanting the property bad enough, they're willing to work with you on that. So keep that in mind. You have control of that property until you don't.
Excellent. Want to thank everybody for having the conversation. I know we didn't solve all the problems of the world today, but we did have a conversation about what to do with our buildings. Thank you for being willing to have this conversation. Coming up in the next month or so, we're going to have a conversation with Disciples Indigenous Ministry. Maybe some of you are familiar or not familiar, but we're going to have a conversation about that, lift up that voice. But a related conversation, I think, is a growing trend that I'm seeing, which is the growing of house churches, right? Just like I shared in the beginning, a church that started in a garage might be a related conversation, the growing of house churches. So, but thank you for joining today, and may you all have a blessed day. Thank you all.
Thank you.